for you. But I love Allah, that's who you are. You know I told me Bokiti. Arana Tosakaria, yeah. What an awesome God, Lord, you reign forever. Yahweh, Yahweh. Somebody say Yahweh, Yahweh. You might tell them all I could see. Across the river, we might get moving between men. Yahweh, Yahweh, oh, Yahweh, Yahweh. Lift your voice and worship. Somebody Yahweh. Let it go, you are God, Yahweh.
Shalom, shalom, Yisrael, Yehonathan Dawid with you here, humbly so once again, what they call the 10th of October 2021. Torah portion number 47, Re'eh. Re'eh means to see. And this is Deuteronomy 11:26 through 16 and 17. Pesach is T minus 188 days, boys and girls. T minus 188 days or so, give it, take a day or so. The Haftorah portion, Isaiah 54:11 through 55:5. Re'eh, number 47 Torah portion, coming close to the final one of number 54. Now, last week in Akabe, which means if you follow, talking about following this 613, we see that it opened up where Yahweh says, if you, plural, will keep my commands, then you, singular, will be blessed. Now, you can't get that in the regular English KJV, that understanding. But what Yahweh said is, you, plural, atem, the Hebrew word atem, as a group. And we have never kept Yahweh's commandments as a group, as a nation, as a people. But he says, you, atah, will get the blessing. So, singularly, we are charged and commanded to be responsible individually to keep these commands. Now, in John 14:21, Yahweh Shua says, he who loves me will be loved by my Father. So once again, Yahweh Shua is the X-Man. Everything comes through him. If you want to be loved by Yahweh, you're going to have to love his Father. Can you imagine saying that you love a man, but you hate his son? You think the Father would say, hey, that's fine, as long as he cares about me? You don't care about a man's son, you're not going to get too far with his father. Now, also in the last week's Torah portion, I talked about how those who love, who think they're going to get into the kingdom with this 613, this is a covenant of blood. Everything is cleansed by blood. Those who are bloodthirsty will love this blood command, this blood covenant. And I talked about how often Yahweh talks about this mighty hand and outstretched arm. This mighty hand is the revelation of the covenant. The outstretched arm is Yahweh Shua, who is our sacrifice of the covenant on the tree. That's the outstretched arm. The mighty hand is the revelation of the covenant. And you get that when you learn and you study this in Ibarit. You can't get that in KJV. You cannot Google this. This knowledge I'm giving you, some scholars will not be able to access it. So we find also that Yah keeps this covenant with us for his own name's sake, because we have failed him since day one. For his own name's sake, find that in Ezekiel 20, 33, 39 through 44, Ezekiel 36 and 22, and a whole lot of places. Yahweh keeps this covenant with us for his own name's sake. He raised his right hand and swore to himself that he was going to keep this, because he could swear to nobody higher. He swore to himself. It ain't because of us. See, this blood covenant, I want to keep reiterating, has a promises of wealth, earthly largesse, and long life. But we want this water covenant. Yahweh is the eternal life of living waters, and that is for eternal life. We want the eternal covenant. But we're going to study this covenant here because of the connotations for us today and for the end times, which we're going to be talking about after that 54th Torah portion. In this Torah portion, number 47, Ray A, we see that before us is a choice, it's two choices. The choice of a blessing and curse. A blessing and a curse. All right? And these laws are for a single, there will be laws for a single centralized place of worship. All right? One place of worship. And we know we don't have that today, but there will be in the future when that temple is rebuilt. And then there's further warnings of laws. Let's begin in chapter 11, verse 26, where Moshe says he presents to us a blessing and a curse. Barakah and Kelala. Not blessings and curses. There's really ultimately one blessing and one curse. And there's ultimately one seed versus one seed. Ultimately. Don't get distracted by all the other stuff going around, but ultimately there's a blessing and a curse. There's one seed versus another seed, one nation versus another nation. In verse 27, Moshe says, the blessings come from not in seeing, but from obedience, to hear. And see, here is Shema. Shema means to discern, not just that you can hear me right now on this radio, but to have discernment. And that is how you get the blessing, not from seeing. Seeing is distracting. Seeing can deceive. We know that all of reality was created from the word. Yahweh spoke in faith, dibarim, words, and substance formed. So all of creation became out of faith. We know Romans 10:17, Shaul says that faith comes by hearing. And hearing what? Hearing the word of Yah. We know that in Habakkuk and Hebrews, Habakkuk 2:4, Hebrews 10:38, the just will live not by seeing, not by just doing a whole bunch of stuff, but by faith. The world was created in faith with the word, which is again Yahweh Shua. If you want to be justified, reconciled to Yahweh through his son, you must do it in emunah, faith. Now, Romans 14:23b says, whatever is not done in faith is sin. That really breaks it real down, real simple. We read all these Torah portions, thousands of words, and you can sum it on down, boil it down into one thing. Anything you do that's outside of faith is sin. Romans 14:23, that last portion of 14:23. Faithlessness is sinfulness. John 10:27, Yahweh Shua says, my sheep shema. His sheep hear his voice. They discern his voice. If you are in a field, there are many shepherds out there, over hundreds of acres of land, and thousands of sheep clumped together around their own shepherd. They learn from birth their shepherd's voice. The thing about sheep is they have very poor eyesight. Naturally, they're born, they just have poor eyesight. But they have acute hearing. And this is how Yahweh created them. And this has spiritual connotation to us, to you and me. We are his sheep. Yahweh Shua is our shepherd. He is a Tob shepherd, the good shepherd. And we're supposed to have discernment to his voice. We're out in the field of the world, and there are many shepherds out there with their individual flocks. You can go wayward to another flock because we have poor eyesight. We're not supposed to live by our own eyesight. We're supposed to live by faith in hearing the word of Yah. Acts 7:57, we find that the first martyr for the Besor message, the Besor which people call the gospel, the Besor message, the first one martyr we know is Stephen. And what did they do? the detractors, the scribes, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, before they stoned him. While he was giving the Besorah message, he did the sermon. They stopped once they discerned that it was convicting them. They stopped their ears. Read the whole narrative in Acts in chapter 7. But in verse 57, it says they covered their ears and ran towards him and took him outside the city and they stoned him. Why did they cover their ears? Anything you hear, you're responsible for. They know that faith comes in hearing. They didn't want to believe that. They didn't want to believe that they were guilty, that they were culpable in the death of salvation, of their own salvation. They covered their ears. That was done for a conscious reason. Why not just pick up stones and stone them? Why cover the ears and then go towards him? We see that in Mark 7:35, that when Yahweh heals the deaf mute, then he began to speak. Do you realize that anyone born deaf is not even able to articulate? A soul can't even speak without hearing. If any soul wants to learn how to speak, they must be able to hear. When Yahweh healed the deaf mute in Mark 7:35, he heard and then he began to speak. Later, Yahweh warns 9 times about the latter days. In Revelations 9 times, he says, he or she who has an ear, let him hear. And he didn't mean having a physical ear to hear the physical words of a person speaking in the ear. He means having discernment in the heart of the mind, to understand, to have discernment in the latter days. Anything that's repeated over and over again, I think you need to pause and stop and think on it and see why is it being said over and over again. For instance, Yahweh's name is in the Bible over almost 7,200 times. Do you think it's important? But he says over and over again, to he who has an ear to let him hear. You must mean something deeper than just hearing like you hear me now, but to have discernment in these latter days. In verse 28, we hear there's a curse for not obeying, which means the curse is for not listening. I mean, listening is discerning. We must hear and listen and shema this word that Yahweh has given to us. In verse 29, he says, you're going to have the blessings. We're going to go to Mount Gerizim, and this happens on the other side of the Jordan with Yahushua, not with Moshe. And the curses go to Mount Ebal. Now, Gerizim means the mountain cut in two. We know that when Yahweh returns on the Mount of Olives, that he's going to split that mountain in two. It's going to become a plain. So it makes sense that the blessings go on the mount, has the same kind of spiritual connotation as Yahweh's return. Ebal means barrenness. Reminds you of Balaam, if you think about it. Barrenness. When there's something that's barren, it has nothing fruitful, no fruitfulness. The accuser worked through Balaam to try to curse Yisrael, which he could not do, which he taught us how to curse ourselves, why we should not do that. But to be cursed is barren. There's no fruitfulness. There's nothing after the life that's living on the earth. Once it dies, there's nothing further to continue on. There's barrenness. Now, think about this. All this proclamations are happening on this side of the Yarden, of the Jordan, in the land where they've already slayed giants. Now they're about to cross over to receive the fulfillment or the completeness of this inheritance of long life. Esau did not cross over. We know the word Hebrew, Ibarit, means one who crosses over. So though Esau is Shemitic, he is not of the covenant. He is not of the covenant. He snuck in and got into this blood covenant, but he is not of the eternal covenant. This all means something. You're going to be ahead of the rest of the people who come in late when we go into Daniel and Revelations after this 54th Torah portion. Going over to chapter 12 of Deuteronomy, the second law, verse 1, 16 times. Again, when things are iterated over and over again, we must perk our ears up and shema. 16 times Moshe says, Teshmerum. That means you will be careful. That means be careful. He wouldn't say it 16 times for no reason. And in verse 2, he says, utterly destroy their idols. Remember, we have to hear the saying, seeing is believing. When you go to old dilapidated neighborhood and it is razed, torn down, and new buildings crop up, new edifices, new offices and buildings, you kind of forget what was there before because you don't see it anymore. It's a whole new neighborhood. Everything is brand new. Everything is just totally new, and you forget. That's what Yahweh wanted. We were to go in there and to totally destroy all of their artifacts, which was low and high and all in between. Destroy those things. Do not even look at them. You know when you see things, it can physically change. There's genetic changes going through the portal of the eyes. Is this not what Jacob did when he got the speckled sheep and goats by manipulating what they saw? Once they procreated, once the male goat or sheep mounted up on a female, he made sure she was looking at stripes while she was eating in the marshy water. He genetically altered the outcome of these births of these lambs and goats by what they saw. We know that seeing is believing. That's why in Corinthians, Shaul says 2 Corinthians 3:18, that we are transformed into the image of Yahweh Shua. Because we see him, we behold him as he is, and we are transformed when we see him, by seeing him. Now our faith is increased by hearing, but there are genetic changes. This is why you can't just sit around and look at porn all day long and think you're not going to be changed. If you sit around and just look at porn, you think you're going to look at a woman the same way? Or you're not going to respect her. If you're looking at porn, you're going to demean women as fleshly satisfaction for yourself. And you're going to sit down and look at porn. Why? Because that's what you were looking at. That's what you were seeing. People look at American Idol hour after hour, and then they go and think, they get in the mirror and try to sing like that and can't sing worth a lick. But they see American Idol, they're going to try to do what they see on there. So we are transformed by what we see physically. There are genetic changes that happens by what we see. This is why Dawid said in Psalm 101, verses 1 through 3, that he will behave wisely and that he will set no wicked thing before his eyes. Because you put wicked things before your eyes, you become wicked. Put righteous things before your eyes, you become righteous. Look at righteous things, Kodesh things, upright things. The name of this Torah portion is Re'eh, see. Look at righteousness and be genetically changed to righteousness. In verse 3, he says, even destroy the very names of these gods. Because remember, hearing increases the faith. So you don't even want to repeat the names of these gods and increase your faith in believing in their gods. He says, don't even inquire how they worship their gods. Who cares how they did it? We are not to worship Yahweh like the heathens worship their gods. How do they worship them? Christmas, Easter, Sunday worship, hot cross buns, ham with the pineapples on them, and all this. Don't worship Yahweh the way they worship theirs. Don't even call on their mighty ones. Now in verses, and I'm going to skip through a lot of this, but let's go to verses 12 through 14 of chapter 12 of Deuteronomy, what they call Deuteronomy. You see, Moshe says 10 times, I keep putting this into your ears, the importance of things that are repeated over again. He says, take heed, Hashmori. 10 times he says, Hashmori. That means take heed. And he says, you will rejoice 13 times. Whoosh katam. Whoosh katam. Rejoice. Ho! Worship Yahweh in rejoicing. Don't worship him because now it's Sabbath, because you have to do it, because you don't have other choices or options. You always have choices and options. There's a tree of life before you. There's a tree of good and evil before you. We are supposed to love him, so you long for him. You're not looking at your watch waiting for the last ticking of the sun, of the setting of the sun for Sabbath to be over. You're not doing that. You're not lusting over the crab meat. You worship Yahweh in joyfulness. And this is a command. He says it 13 times. Rejoice. You will rejoice. And he says, take heed. Hashmor 10 times. Take heed. Be careful. Be careful. Teshmaroon 16 times to be careful. In understanding. Because what's happening is they're really not getting discernment of understanding this 613. Then skipping through here because I don't want to get caught. This is a long Torah portion. But there is a distinction between what is Kodesh for offerings and what is Kodesh to eat. For example, gazelle and deer are never on an altar. Bass and croaker fish are never on the altar. But you can eat these kind of fish. You can eat, turkey is never on the altar. You can eat this kind of bird. You can eat those kind of creatures, but they're never on the altar. There is another level. See, because Yahweh knows, this is deep, why some things are on the altar, can be altered on the altar, and some things can't, even though they may be Kodesh to eat. It's all about the spirit of a thing. Who created everything? Correct. So he should know what spirit he put in a thing. He's the one that created it, and he knows what was contaminated. Remember, as in the days of Moses, all flesh was contaminated, except Moshe, his wife, and his 3 sons. They were contaminated with intrusion of fallen angels. They had sex with the animals and everything. Some things received the spirit of the fallen angels, some didn't. After the flood, they were taught mixture. The demons taught mixture. They didn't have direct sex with the creatures and the peoples. They did it by mixture. So Yahweh knows what spirits and animals that he can receive and what he can't because of contamination. But in creation, all is clean. It is things got contaminated after the fall of man. Now in chapter 12, I actually want to read verse 22. Let's read this quick. In chapter 12, verse 22 of Deuteronomy. And it reads, just as the gazelle and the deer are eaten, so you may eat them. The unclean and the clean alike may eat them. I want to clarify that because it says the unclean alike you may eat them. This means the unclean for the altar. We know that the deer and gazelle is not unclean, so Yahweh's not saying you can eat unclean. But he's talking about a differentiation to what is clean to eat and what is clean for the altar. So I want to make that differentiation there. When people, first of all, most of you don't want to even read these first 5 books anyway. It's boring to you. But should you read that, make sure there's a distinction about what is clean and what is unclean to eat and what is clean and what is unclean to sacrifice with. And this is also speaks to, how does it matter today? This also speaks to, again, to Jacob and his big brother Esau. Both Shemitic, both come from the same father and mother, but not both of the covenant. One snuck in for the bloody covenant with his bloodthirsty lovingness, but he can't sneak in with the water covenant, the eternal one. Yahweh makes the distinction. This is why I'm saying these things, get you to make this relative for you, this stone covenant. I'm trying to make it relative to you today for your understanding, because you cannot Google these things I'm talking about. Not most of these things. Now, why is it that our Jewish brothers cannot accept your Christian Jesus Christ? Chapter 13 tells you the test of the false prophet. See, our Christian brothers tell us that the law is done away with. As such, our Jewish brothers cannot accept or receive your Jesus Christ, because your Jesus Christ in your doctrine says the law is done away with. They divide and say there's a moral law and all that. There's no such thing as no different kinds of laws when it comes to the 10 Commandments. How is it that you can keep 9 but not keep the 4th? The only commandment of the 10 that says remember is the one that the Christians don't keep. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days for your labor, do all your work, but the 7th day is the Sabbath, Yahweh your Elohim. He says, remember, zakar. The other 9, no Christian says don't keep it. All Christians believe you're supposed to obey your mother and father. All Christians believe you should not covet, you should not lie, you should not steal. The honor they call him the Lord. They believe in all the other 9 except number 4. And they replace that with pay your tithes and your offerings. So you still got your 10. They put their tithes and offerings in there, even though that is for a land covenant and that is for the old covenant. They put that in there. You ain't you have no meat to bring into the storehouse. The only place they jump on Malachi so they can get their tithes and offerings, but they cannot keep the Shabbat. So that is the litmus test for your Jewish brothers. They're not going to follow the Lord God Jesus Christ when we're told that a false prophet is going to tell them. Let's read verse 3. It says, you will not listen to the words of that prophet or the dreamer of dreams, because Yahweh your Elohim is testing you to know whether you will love Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart and all your soul. The test is for the student. When a teacher gives a test, it's not for the teacher. It's for the student to find out what they know and what they don't know. You get a test, you got an 86 on it. Now 14% of the test you didn't know. Now you know what you don't know. You get a 73. So now 27% you don't know. You get a 96, 4% you don't know. Yahweh gives the test for you to know what you don't know. He already knows your heart. And in your heart, you're supposed to love him with all your heart, might, and soul, and not follow false prophets. A false prophet will deny the law. There was understanding this. Verse 7 of the same chapter reads, of the mighty ones of the people which are all around you, near to you or far off from you, from one end to the earth to the other end, you are not to serve them. We were scattered from one end to the earth to the other. This is why he said that. Here on this end of the earth, from one end of the earth to the other, we were scattered away from our central place of worship. And there are gods all over. Hare Krishna, Dalai Lama, Jehovah, Jesus Christ. All these none of these came from Eretz Yisrael. None of these gods came from there. And now we're all over the world worshiping their gods. And we got the nerve to tell a Jewish brother he's supposed to accept Jesus Christ. How is he going to accept Jesus Christ when you deny the law? But Yahweh is the law. We're supposed to be directing them to Yahweh. Let's read John 5, 42 to 47. John 5, 42 to 47. This is Yahweh talking. But I know you, that you do not have the love of Yahweh in you. I have come in my Father's name, shame, and you do not receive me. If another comes in his own name, him you will receive. How can you believe who receives honor from one another, and do not seek the honor that comes from the only living Elohim? Do not think that I will accuse you to the Father. There is one who accuses you, Moshe, in whom you trust. Because if you believe Moshe, you will believe me, because he wrote about me. But if you do not believe his writings, how will you believe my Dibarim? See why I'm saying this? I'm teaching these Torah portions because Yahweh said out of his own mouth to the scribes and Pharisees that they all spoke to him. I'm not teaching about keeping stone commandments so you can get into the kingdom. I'm teaching that this is Yahweh Shua. And if you shema, if you discern, you will see that these commandments direct your eyeballs and your ears, your hands and your feet, your heart and your mind to him. He is the actualization. See, You're going you going to Disney World. You're gonna take your family to Disney World. You're gonna drive down there. You don't know how to get down there. You get a map. And you know, okay, I'm old. Okay, I'm north of 50. Now you just go ahead and thumb it and all that. But I'm just saying is you need directions, instructions how to get there. Once you get there, you're gonna still be on MapQuest, or you still gonna be on your GPS inside of Disney World? Is obsolete. You're at the destination. You're having fun. You're on the rides. You're eating overpriced food. You're looking. You bought those stupid mouse ears. You're in Disney World. Why are you still looking at a map? Why are you still looking at GPS? Why are you still doing that? It's obsolete. You're there. You don't need it. This is what this is like. Once Yahweh has arrived, these commandments teach you of him. It's supposed to direct you to him. To receive him from the written to your heart. Then you receive him. You're going to serve him and love him and serve him in your heart. He says, just as Yahweh says out of his own mouth, that Moshe spoke about him. All this was about him. All this Torah portion is about him. And they don't discern it because they think it's about sacrificing and blood and guts. They think it's the bloodthirsty love this bloodthirsty law, the Erev Rav. And this is why they're trying to block me now and keep me off the channel, keep me off social media, because I'm teaching the truth and I'm letting you know this is the Erev Rav, who's your enemy, the bloodthirsty ones, Esau. That's your enemy. Those are the ones who are trying to get you to get into the kingdom with commandments, with the laws that he is using to give you temporary blessings, which they have now. They have wealth now. They run everything. It's their world. You're just being miserable in it. You see, the law is like this. Adam was created perfect, but not complete. He was not complete. He had to have breath breathed into him, and then he had to be fruitful. The first commandment given to him was to be fruitful and multiply. Did he be fruitful and multiply? Did he do that? No, he did not. So he did not complete his he did not complete his instructions. Born perfect, not complete. There has to be a birth, a life, a death, and a resurrection for fruitfulness. See, if you have 10 apple seeds in your hand, they're perfect. They're perfect. Perfect apple seeds. But you would die. You cannot eat 10 apple seeds and live. You would die. Those apple seeds are perfect, but they're not complete. They're not complete until they have been fruitful. They had to be in the earth, and then they had to die. Die in the earth, and then grow. Once they grow up, and then they bear countless apples for countless generations, and then you can eat. You will be more satiated eating an apple than eating apple seeds. You can eat 10 apple seeds and you'll starve. Eat 10 apples, you can carry you for a while. So completeness is being fruitful. And this word is to teach us to be fruitful in Yahweh Shua. You got a perfect Torah, it is dead. What breathes life into it is Ruach HaKodesh. You know it's got to be true because in the beginning of the book it says, in the beginning God created the heaven and earth. That's what it says. Is that true? How come when I read it, I don't see that God created heaven? How come I see Yahweh created heaven and earth? Ruach HaKodesh. See, so when Ruach is in me, there's life in me. There's living in me. I receive the life of Yahweh Shua, the eternal life, not the blood, but the Mayim, not the dome, which is the blood, but the Mayim, which is the water. That's the eternal life. That's what we were supposed to take from the tree in the very beginning that we didn't. You see, people getting it twisted. You're going to learn. You're going to be ahead of everyone else when we go over Daniel Revelations because there's two different types of falls. Yahweh tells us that he tells us the end from the beginning. Adam did not fall from being deceived. He saw himself. He had a wife taken from his side. His charge was to keep her, to direct her, to lead her. So she was deceived. How could he leave her? He figured he's doing his job. He's going to die for her. But Yahweh says you cannot die for her. You cannot bring her back. Only I can do it. And that's what this whole covenant is about. If you want to break it down to simple form, Adam was not deceived. He went on with his wife, figuring that he was going to redeem her and bring her back to Yahweh, bring her back to the garden, but he could not do that. He does not qualify. So at the end, there's going to be two different types of redemption. The seed of Adam, which is man, is going to be resurrected, Yom Teruah, after the sixth seal earthquake. But then there's a remnant, the woman's seed. But women don't have a seed. This woman is the earth. The earth receives seed and becomes fruitful. That's why when Yahweh says in Ezekiel about the woman being foul, and in Hosea, that you can't, if you divorce a woman, you can't come back to her. She lives with another man because the land is defiled. She's compared to being the land. She has no seed. She receives seed. And then out of that, she bears forth fruitfulness. So the remnant is going to be of the woman's quote-unquote seed, which was Yahweh Shua. She has to be brought out of that deceitfulness. She was deceived. After the resurrection, you're going to have the whole world being deceived. But the remnant is going to be protected. This is deep stuff I'm teaching here. You're going to get that in more detail when we go over this Daniel Revelations. I'm giving you an early heads up on this right now. I just told you some deep stuff that you cannot Google. It takes fasting and prayer and meditation and a sold-out heart to Yahweh Shua. Let's read Galatians 2:16. See if your preacher is telling you that. Even your Hebrew preachers. Galatians 2:16, and it reads, "So let no one judge you in food or drink, or regarding a festival or a new moon or Shabbat." Now, I'm going to read a series of scriptures that trips people up. Trips people up when they want to talk about it's okay to go ahead and eat anything you want. Let's go to Romans 14. Romans 14. And I'm not going to read all of it. I'm going to read verses 2, 3, 14, 15, 17, 20, and 21. We'll explain it later, but I want to just read it first. "For one believes he may eat all things, but he who is weak eats only vegetables. Let not him who eats despise him who does not eat, and let not him who does not eat judge him who eats, because Yahweh has received him." Going down to 14. "I know and am convinced by Messiah Yahweh Shua, that there is nothing unclean of itself. But to him who considers anything to be unclean, to him it is unclean. Yet if your brother is grieved because of your food, you are no longer walking in love. Do not destroy with your food the one for whom Messiah died." Go to 17 and 21. "Because the kingdom of Yahweh is not eating and drinking, but righteousness and shalom and joy in the Kodesh, Ruach HaKodesh. Do not destroy the work of Yahweh for the sake of food. All things indeed are pure, but it is evil for the man who eats with offense. It is told good neither to eat meat, nor drink wine, nor do anything by which your brother stumbles, or is offended, or is made weak." Then if you look at 1 Corinthians 8, 1 through 13, I'm not going to have time to read all that. He talks about being sensitive to your brother, which I read a little bit right here. Being sensitive for his sake, doing different things for the sake of the weaker person in the faith of Yahweh Shua. You've been in for 40 years. There's certain things you have liberties to do to somebody who's just been in for 40 days. So you got to bring him up along or her up along. And then in Acts 10 through 15, Peter had the dream and he was told to eat what was clean and unclean. He said he's not going to do that. There's unclean animals on that sheet. And he didn't do it, not getting it. But if you read Hosea 2, 14 through 18, and Ezekiel 34, 20 to 25, you see that Yahweh compares men to beasts. So there's something deeper going on here. So let's go ahead and get it clear and explain it. It's not about the kingdom, like he said, it's not about eating and drinking and meats. It is about the spirituality of the connection of it. What is it about food? The Hebrew word for food is okel. The Greek word is broma. Food Do not get it mixed with what is not food. If I told you eat everything on the table, are you going to eat all the food on the table? Are you going to also eat the plate and the fork and the knives? Are you going to eat the tablecloth? No, because I said eat all the food on the table. You already know that the plate and the fork and the knives are not food. This is, so to the Hebrew mind, pork, crab, shrimp, lobster, that's not food. So when they were talking about this, they were talking about food. And you had differentiations of people. The whole narrative is about food, not about what is clean and unclean. Just like I was telling you, showing you in earlier of how what was sacrificed on the altar, some things were unclean, even though they were clean to eat, like the deer and the gazelle. They are clean to eat, but not clean for the altar. Fast forward here to the New Testament, this whole narrative is not talking about whether now it's okay to eat crab cakes and shrimp. It's saying some people are even more precise in eating what is clean. Some people don't think they should eat any meat at all. They should just be vegetarian. Then don't offend them by offering them meat. Meat that's clean to eat. This is also differentiating between us today when Yahweh gave Peter that dream with the unclean animals to eat. This goes out to how now this word goes from the Hebrew, which is clean, to the so-called unclean, the Gentiles. And Yahweh says, don't call them unclean. They are clean. They may not be of the original covenant, but they are clean. People are getting mixed up between what is clean and unclean, what is Hebrew, what is Gentile. They're all clean of what is Kodesh under Yahweh. This is why I want to show you the difference between a sheep and a goat and a gazelle and a deer. All four animals are clean, but only two of them are clean for the covenant. Over here, we have Hebrews and you have Greeks. All are clean, but only Hebrews are clean for the covenant. But the differentiation between the wheat and the tares is even finer than that. You got two seeds, two nations. Nation against nation that Yahweh talks about in Matthew 24. Nation against nation. Not plural. That's Jacob and Esau. Both are Shemitic. One's clean, one's unclean. One's for salvation, water. One's for the blood, death, blood. You ain't going to make it. This is deep information I just gave you about the clean and unclean, about the discernment of the wheat and the tares. One is ruling now, and the end of his world is going to be the beginning of your world. And this is why they're filtering me out. Because you got a brother who's not being caught up in the moment of what's, you know, one of the things they filter me out is because of what I said about this, about the mask and all that. You know, you've never seen me do a broadcast based on what's going on today. I'm not caught up in the moment. The message every day is Yahweh Shua. And I speak to things that's going on today as it is germane to the topic. As it is germane to the topic. I don't make it the meal. At best, they're the garnishes. And if it's germane to the topic, I will talk about it. But the only thing, if you're hanging from the cliff on your ankles, the only thing that matters is life and death. Not whether you wore your seats that day. Not the arguments you had with your wife, not even what you ate. It is about life and death. And every week on these airways, on the famous 1590 WFBR, on Sundays from 1 to 2, I'm giving you life and death. Yahweh Shua. Going to chapter 15, verses 1 through 6, talks about debts and how they're to be given after the 6th year. The 7th year is debt-free. And then you have a Jubilee year on the 49th, at the 49th year, the 50th year of Jubilee year. How is that important today? That is important today. Because what's going to happen after the 6,000th year of man, Yahweh's going to forgive our debts. We have the resurrection, and we are returned to him. Now, of course, you have the remnant who has to go through the process of the deception because Eve was deceived. So she's going to have to go through, she's going to be protected, go through the deception process. But guess what? If you read in chapter 15, verses 1 through 6, the foreigner is still, and the Hebrew word is nakri, he is the alien, he still has to pay his debts. That is the discernment you must have between what is righteous and what is not righteous. They still have to pay their debt. They can pay their debt by keeping the 613, and they're going to do that for 1,000 years. Now, after that 1,000 years, if they're going to still see that as their righteousness, they're going to go with it because it is for long life. Who cares if you even live for 1,000 years? You know you're going to die and there's nothing after that but barrenness. Wouldn't you rather have eternal life? See how deep this is? See how I'm making this Torah portion germane to you today and making it real for you today? This Jubilee means something for today. Yahweh's going to, he has to abide by his own laws. You're going to be free after the 6th year, which is the 6,000th year, which is we're almost coming up to now. Yahweh's going to free you. He's going to free you, those who follow him, who loves his son. Remember, Yahweh says Yahweh loves those who love him. That means if you don't love Yahweh, Yahweh ain't going to love you. What's the opposite of love? What did he say about Esau when he came out of the womb? You're cold by love, but Esau I have hated. He said it coming out of the womb because he knows the heart. He knows the heart. You don't. You don't even know your own heart. I don't even know my own heart. But Yahweh does. The foreigner still has to pay his debts. That word is not Cree. But for those who Yahweh's friends, his neighbors, his brothers, they are forgiven of their debts. Isn't this a Tob thing? This is a good thing. The 7th year, he forgives us of our debts. And the remnant are the poor. And they, undefiled religion, is servicing the poor, helping out the poor. In verses 7 through 11, the order of how we're supposed to help people is this. You first supposed to help out the most destitute person who needs the help. Next is your family members in order of closeness. You're not going to help out your cousin before you help out your sister. If they both need the same thing, you're supposed to help your sister first. This is the Bible now. This verses 7 through 11 of chapter 15. So you help out the most, then next you help out the poor people in your city. You're not supposed to be giving money to people in India, starving people in South Africa, and when people right here in East Baltimore are hungry. This is in the Bible. You help out the poor people in your own city before you help out people on some cross land over there. You don't even see them. You got somebody down the street, somebody in West Baltimore hungry. You're going to try to feed somebody in India? The hell with that. You got hungry people here, you feed them first if you're able. Next, you feed the poor people in your country. So after that, you have no poor. You got somebody in Idaho, they get fed or helped or give money or help before somebody in Germany that's poor. That's the Bible. So that's the order of helping people out. Then verses 12 through 15, Yahweh talks about the laws of the Hebrew slaves. And that has importance for us today because we know that once the slave is set free, they get they get blessed beautifully with mighty gifts and stuff from the owner. That's what's going to happen to us. We are supposed to be Yahweh's Eber, his slave. And the laws of slavery, if you go to Isaiah 16:14, it's supposed to be for 3 years. How long has your slave master kept you? We in over 400 years and counting. They're going to pay for that. They're going to pay for that. So now we're going to find that in this millennial kingdom, they're all are going to be, we're going to go back to this millennial kingdom is going to be back to an agricultural society. Because Yahweh is going to, the time clock is going to be all back unified. We're going to have 12 months or 30 days each, where we're going to be able to, once again, keep the remnant and those who are outside of the covenant, who's supposed to be keeping the Noah, what they call the Noahide laws, are now going to be on one accord and keeping the 613. Okay? So now you can keep the 613. The Erev Rav and their self-righteousness is going to keep it dutifully. And the remnant going to be able to do it. But then it's those after that 1,000 years are up that receive Yahweh Shua in their heart. And Yahweh Shua says the whole of the book talks about him. They will be the ones that's going to cross over to receive the eternal gift of Yahweh Shua, not the self-righteousness of having kept the 613. This is what our forefathers did not get while they were right here on the other side of Jordan, while Moshe was reading all this as a prophet. Remember, the first 4 books that Moshe gave to us was given to us as the oracle of Yahweh. Yahweh literally was speaking through his body. He was the oracle, the actual literal oracle. But in Deuteronomy, the 5th book, this is Moshe speaking as a prophet, the greatest of all prophets, but still a prophet, which is a little bit lower than being an oracle, but still great. It's fine. But he's a prophet. And he says to heed and take careful to this. Wait till you find out, I'm telling you, when we get to Daniel Revelations about this 613. And why Moshe kept saying over and over again, take heed and be careful. Take heed, be careful. As we go down to now the final chapter of this Torah portion. And there's always more than what I'm giving you. But I always get stuck, so I skip through a lot of stuff. But you can contact the brother and get the transcripts. Hopefully, I get myself back on YouTube. I do not know when. Looks like they're going to try to ban me for 3 months. That's what it looked like to me. Chapter 16, verse 1. The Shiloh Regalim. These are the 3 feast days, and they are feast days where the men are commanded to come together. Why is it just the men? This is a legal thing. Remember, I talked about how in the counting of the census, it's always the men of warring age that are counted. That was done when we came out of Mizraim. It was also done right before we got and took the land. Only the men are counted. We were counted as a group coming out of Mizraim, and then we were counted by tribes before we got into the Kodesh land. Only the men of warring age. That means something. And this is not just Old Testament. In the so-called New Testament, the Brit Hadashah, when Yahweh Shua fed the 5,000 and the 4,000, they were only counting the men. We know he fed more than 5,000. He fed more than 4,000. There were women and children there as well. We know there were children there because it was a boy that gave up his fish sandwiches so everybody else can eat. He was not counted in the census. This has significance to the end times, because in the end times, see, the man is the legal count. It is the man who Yahweh has to redeem legally, and he's going to do his part, and he did his part, and that man's seed is represented in the resurrection. The woman's seed is represented in the remnant. The remnant are going to be the poor, the needy, the women, the widows, the children under 20 years old, fatherless and widows. That's the remnant. It will be no men of warring age. It's right here in the book if you have ears to hear, to discern. The remnant will be the poor, the women, the widows, and the orphans. Those are the ones who have not been counted. This is why we must also right now honor them and support them and help them. That's going to be your remnant. It's not, we've already failed Yahweh. Like the prophet said, all we have done was deliver the gas, a big wind, a big fart. We have not turned over these nations to Yahweh. Look at the nations. And all this I'm doing, have I turned over even Baltimore? Have we turned the nations over? Is the world calling out on Yahweh? You're not going to do it until Yahweh forces it. He scattered us, and he's the only one that's going to be able to get us to call on his name as a group, as a nation, and everyone will do it. Every knee will bow, and every tongue will confess that Yahweh Shua HaMashiach is sovereign. Philippians 2, 9 through 11. Now, you're going to, once again, all throughout this Torah portion, Moshe continues to say, celebrate and rejoice. Celebrate and rejoice. On these Shalosh Raglim, we're not supposed to celebrate this in isolated fashion. Yahweh has no secret revelation for you. When it comes to Shavuot, Sukkot, and all, we're supposed to worship as a group. We're supposed to worship as a group and come together as a group for the revelations, whatever Yahweh has to share with us. Now, and we're supposed to do this with rejoicing and be happy and exceedingly glad. Not with a chip on our shoulder like, oh, here we go again. Another year was failure. No, another year closer to redemption. They said that at the first time, that anything in the ancient world, 120 years preaching of the same sermon by Noah. Would you sit down and even hear the same sermon from your preacher even 1 month, 4 weeks, or say in this month is 5 Shabbats, 5 weeks, you hear the same sermon, the same, would you even come the next week? That's how we are. But Noah preached the same sermon for 120 years, getting to the T-ball. That was the only way of salvation. That was Yahweh Shua. And he is the X-Man. His only salvation, only through him. But eventually, the world did come to an end. The world did, and it's going to happen again. I'm going to give the same message every week as Yahweh Shua. And it's going to happen. He said it, and he always keeps covenant. Now, do you realize that there are 8 categories? Look at verse 15. 8 categories of Hebrews that we are commanded to include: the poor, the Levite, the proselyte, and the orphan and the widow. That's because those are the ones who are the remnant, who are saved by grace. That's the quote-unquote seed of the woman. We know the woman doesn't have a seed. She receives seed. She receives seed, which is Yahweh Shua. The Ruach HaKodesh overshadowed her. And so she's saved by grace. But the other 4 we're commanded to take care of are the son, the daughter, and the slave, the maidservant. Where's the wife? That's deep. We're commanded to take care of the son, the daughter, and our slave and maidservant, but never the wife. It doesn't say anything about the wife. Isn't that interesting? Again, that probably has connotations. Now, it's deep, but I can give more enlightenment on that. But it doesn't. Matter of fact, even you look at the 10 Commandments, and it's given to us twice in Genesis. In Exodus and also Deuteronomy 5. In both times, in the 4th commandment, everyone's told to keep the Shabbat, but he doesn't mention the wife. My son, my daughter, my maidservant, my manservant, my cattle, my ox. I cannot hire somebody to cut my grass on Shabbat, but doesn't mention the wife under me keeping Shabbat. And neither in Deuteronomy 5. There's a distinction between the man and the woman. There were 2 different kinds of falls. There's going to be 2 different kinds of redemption. In the latter days, people are getting it mixed up because they're not getting this correct. They're not getting it accurate. How much time I got? 2. So next week, Torah portion number 48, Shaphatim. Shaphatim is Hebrew for judges. And that goes from Deuteronomy 16:18 through Deuteronomy 21:9. Talk about the Hebrew Constitution, rules for judges, kings, Levites, prophets, cities, refuge, witnesses, war, and unsolved murders. Yehonatan Dawid with you here. Shalom Malakim. Peace be on you.
Bow before you. Crown me up, but Allah, that's who you are. You wanna call me Bokiti. Arana Tosakaria, yeah. What an awesome God, enduring forever. Yahweh.